Email came on a Tuesday morning while I was still in my pajamas, halfway through my second cup of coffee. Not a phone call, not a sit-down conversation, an email. From my own father's business partner, who also happened to be my uncle, with the subject line, "Regarding your position at Hartwell & Sons." I remember staring at it for a full minute before I opened it. Something in my stomach already knew. Effective immediately, your role as operations director is being dissolved. The family has voted. Your equity stake of 35% is being restructured under the terms of the original partnership agreement, Section 12, Clause 4. Please do not access company systems or the physical premises until further notice. Our attorney will be in contact within 72 hours. There was no signature, just the company letterhead. The same letterhead I had redesigned 2 years ago because my uncle said the old one looked dated. I sat there with my coffee going cold and read it 4 more times. Not because I didn't understand it, because I kept waiting for a part of me to fall apart, and it never did. What I felt instead was something quieter and much more dangerous than tears. It was clarity. Let me back up. My grandfather started Hartwell & Sons in 1987 out of a rented garage in Columbus, Ohio. 2 brothers, 3 pickup trucks, a commercial cleaning contracts business that grew into one of the largest facility management companies in the Midwest. When he passed, he left equal thirds to my father, my uncle, and a trust for the grandchildren, which, in practice, meant me, since I was the only one who ever actually showed up. My father had a heart condition that kept him out of the day-to-day. My uncle ran the financial side. And me? I had been working in that company since I was 19 years old. Not in a nepotism corner office way. I started answering phones. I moved to scheduling. Then logistics. Then I spent 2 years overhauling the client contract system that had been running on literal spreadsheets from 2003. By the time I was 28, I was operations director, managing 43 employees across 6 regional offices. I did that. Not because my last name was on the building. Because I was there at 7 in the morning when the building flooded and someone had to call the contractors. Because I flew to Detroit on a Friday night to smooth over a client we almost lost because my uncle forgot to send the renewal quote. Because I built the systems, hired the people, and kept the machine running while my uncle attended golf tournaments and called it client development. My 35% was written into the restructured partnership when my grandfather's estate was settled. My father held 35%. My uncle held 30%. It was designed so that no single branch of the family could be outvoted without at least some consensus. My grandfather was careful that way. He didn't trust easy alliances. What he didn't account for was my father trusting his brother more than he trusted the math. The first sign something was shifting came about 8 months before the email. My uncle started bringing his son, my cousin, into meetings. Not unusual on its own. The kid had just graduated, family business, of course you bring him in. But then his son started sitting in on my operational reviews, started asking questions that weren't his to ask, started CCing himself on emails between me and department heads. I mentioned it to my father once, gently. I said it felt like territory was being redefined without anyone telling me the new map. My father told me I was being sensitive. 3 months later, my cousin was given the title of Director of Special Projects. Nobody asked me what I thought. Nobody told me what the projects were, but suddenly he had access to the same internal systems I did, the same vendor contacts, the same client files. I started keeping records. Not paranoia, documentation. Every decision I made, I noted it. Every email I sent, I kept a personal copy. Every client call I took, I logged it. I didn't know exactly what was coming, but I had worked in business long enough to understand that when people stop including you in conversations you used to lead, the conversation has already moved on without you. The second sign was the board meeting I wasn't invited to. We had a quarterly review in March. I found out about it because our accountant mentioned offhandedly that she'd submitted the Q1 numbers for the meeting. I asked which meeting. She looked at me the way people look at you when they've accidentally said something they weren't supposed to. I called my father that night. He said it was just a preliminary discussion, nothing formal. He'd fill me in, he never did. I want to be honest about something because I think it matters. I loved my father. I still do. I don't think he is a bad person. I think he is a tired person who spent 30 years deferring to his older brother on everything from business decisions to what kind of car to buy, and by the time I was born, that pattern was so deep, it had roots. He genuinely believed that whatever his brother told him was probably right, and whatever I was feeling was probably an overreaction. That's not an excuse, but it's the truth, and I think you deserve the truth. So when the email came that Tuesday morning, I understood on some level that my father had been in that conversation, had been part of that vote, had chosen the path of least resistance, which was also the path that led directly through me. I didn't call him right away. I didn't call anyone. I got up, rinsed my coffee cup, took a shower, and then I called an attorney. Not a family friend. Not someone recommended by anyone I knew through work. I found her myself. A corporate litigation partner at a firm on the other side of the city who had spent 20 years doing exactly this kind of case. Business disputes, partnership agreements, equity restructuring. Her name was Ms. Portman, and she had the energy of someone who had heard every version of this story and was not impressed by any of them, including mine. "Walk me through the equity structure," she said. And I did. I walked her through all of it. The original partnership. My grandfather's trust. The restructuring document I had signed when I joined as a full equity partner at 26. The clause my uncle had cited in his email, Section 12, Clause 4, which I had pulled up on my laptop before I called her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That clause applies to partners who have been inactive for more than 18 consecutive months. Have you been inactive?" "I ran the company," I said. "I have documentation going back 4 years." Another pause. "Okay," she said. "Then they made a mistake." Not a dramatic statement. Just a fact, delivered in the same tone you might use to tell someone their tire is low. They made a mistake, and now we needed to figure out what to do about it. Here is what they had gotten wrong. My uncle had been so confident that I would either fold immediately or come in screaming, that I would do something emotional and reactive that would make me look unstable. That he hadn't been careful. He had cited a clause that didn't apply to me. He had sent that email from a company account, which meant it was a documented official communication. He had used the word voted, which implied a formal proceeding, but there was no record of that meeting being properly noticed under the partnership agreement's own terms. Miss Portman laid it out very quietly. They had tried to remove me without following their own process, using a clause that didn't fit, via a communication channel that created a paper trail. If I pushed back legally, they were exposed. Not just to restoring my position, to damages. She asked me what I wanted. I sat with that for a long moment. My whole life I had wanted to be in that company. I had built my identity around it, my routine, my relationships. The idea of walking back in felt like victory. It also felt like going back to a house where someone had just tried to lock you out. "I don't want to go back," I said. She didn't flinch. "Then we negotiate an exit on your terms." I want to describe what that felt like because I think it's important. It didn't feel like revenge exactly. It felt like finally standing on solid ground after months of feeling the floor shift under me without understanding why. I wasn't going to fight to be allowed back into a place that had decided I was disposable. I was going to make them pay the correct price for that decision. Ms. Portman sent a letter to my uncle's attorney 3 days after the email. It was precise, calm, and left absolutely no room for interpretation. We were not accepting the restructuring. We were disputing the removal on the grounds that the cited clause did not apply. We were requesting a full audit of the Q1 board meeting that had been held without proper notice to an equity partner, and we were reserving the right to pursue damages for breach of the partnership agreement. My uncle called my father. My father called me. "This is getting out of hand," he said. He sounded exhausted. "You voted to remove me from the company without telling me," I said. "That's what's out of hand." Silence. "Your uncle thought it would be cleaner this way," he finally said. "Cleaner for who?" He didn't answer that. I told him I loved him and that I hoped we could have a real conversation soon, but that right now I needed him to let the attorneys do their work. He said okay in the way people say okay when they mean I don't know what else to say. What happened over the next 6 weeks was not dramatic. No screaming matches, no scenes, just a series of carefully worded legal exchanges while I sat in my apartment and, for the first time in years, slept through the night. My uncle's initial position was that the clause had been applied correctly and that my removal was final. Miss Portman responded with my documentation, 4 years of logged decisions, emails, client communications, project files, signed contracts, all demonstrating active, continuous operation of the business. His argument started to thin pretty quickly. Then he shifted. He said that while the clause application might have been imperfect, the family had a right to restructure and I should accept a reduced buyout and move on. We sent back a counter. He came down. We held. He came down again. Here's the part I want you to understand, because I think it's the part people leave out of these stories. I wasn't negotiating from anger. I was negotiating from documentation. Every number Ms. Portman put on the table was supported by 4 years of records I had kept, not because I expected this, but because I was good at my job, and good at my job meant knowing what you'd built. They settled. I won't give you the exact number because some things should stay private, but I will tell you this. It was enough to fund the company I had been quietly drafting a business plan for over those 6 weeks. Not cleaning and facility management, consulting. Helping small and mid-sized businesses build the operational systems that companies like my grandfather's needed and never had. My first client signed on 4 weeks after the settlement. My uncle sent me an email 3 months later asking if I'd consider returning in an advisory capacity. I didn't respond for 2 days. Then I wrote back one sentence. I appreciate the thought, but I'm fully committed to my current work. Technically true. Also exactly what I meant. My father and I have dinner every few weeks now. We talk around the thing that happened for the first couple of months, and then one evening he just looked at me across the table and said, I should have called you before any of that. Yeah, I said. You should have. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, I told him. And I meant that too. My cousin, I heard through a mutual contact, is struggling with the operations side of things. Apparently the systems are harder to run than they looked when someone else was running them. I don't find that satisfying, exactly, but I'd be lying if I said I found it surprising. There is something I think about sometimes when I'm at my desk in the office I lease on the 4th floor of a building I chose myself with a team I hired myself, serving clients I brought in myself. My grandfather used to say that the most dangerous thing you could give a person was the feeling that they were temporary. That once someone believed they were replaceable, they stopped investing in permanence. He built that company because he wanted something that lasted. He left it to his family because he believed that people who shared blood shared values. He wasn't wrong about the business. He was a little too optimistic about the blood. I think about the Tuesday morning when I opened that email and waited to feel like the ground had dropped out from under me, and instead felt something click into place. Like a door I'd been standing in front of for years had finally opened, just not the one I expected. I don't call it revenge. Revenge implies the goal was to hurt them. I just made sure that when they tried to write me out of the story, they had to pay the correct price for the edit. And then I went and wrote a better one.